have to say I'm quite pleased to see that James broke his agreement with Labour last night to stand in Peter Dunn's electorate, stand a Greens candidate in Peter Dunn's electorate, because it kind of lacks integrity, which means surely the Greens leadership is up for grabs. And then I was thinking, if the Greens joined with New Zealand First, then wait, I need to multitask. Throw the giraffe to the dog. So empty house. But then I was thinking the Greens and New Zealand First would make the perfect coalition partners, because New Zealand First is economic policies, and I mean it's so funny watching interviews and seeing journalists saying keep Winston Peters away from monetary policy. Are you kidding me? If you're a New Zealander, get Winston Peters on monetary policy. He's the only person suggesting that we should be defending ourselves from this international corporatisation of our country. You know, the TTPA introduced by Helen Clark, will be carried on by Taxinda, and that will enable corporations to sue us for our public budget. Now, as I've mentioned in a previous video, I actually dealt with a legal case where this was happening through an old World Bank agreement in El Salvador, and they were suing, it was a New Zealand director involved, and they were suing the public budget for 300 million, that's half of the annual public budget of this country. That is going to happen in New Zealand if we don't stand against it. And Labour and National, you know, straight through with that, no problem. They are systematically installing an economic system for an international elite. You know, I find it amazing that grown men defend the foreign right to own our property, our assets, our businesses, our currencies, our debt, everything. You know, why? How is that logical? Why would you defend your neighbouring nations, wealthiest, to own most of all of the money you make, all of the businesses on the land and all of the land, because that's where it's heading. And, you know, and I guess that works if every country is a corporation and under the purview of the United Nations, the unipolar global governance group, which is deeply concerning for a whole lot of other reasons. You know, introducing their SDGs, which sound like something else, Sustainable Development Goals, but it shouldn't really be abbreviated because it's a bit scary sounding at first listen in case you get it wrong. And so but back to my point. I have to throw a giraffe on my dog because I'm a good mother, dedicated. Except the giraffe's not anywhere to be seen, but she's still barking at me as I should. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is this: New Zealand First and the Greens would make an excellent coalition partner, because New Zealand First has the best economic policy to protect New Zealand, but they're dirty industrialists. If you read their policy, it's like steamroll the environmental court to get through fracking, kind of managed by the Resource Management Act, even though that's impossible because fracking is devastating to the health and the environment no matter how you manage it, and to my knowledge, not really very profitable. There was like a massive bubble in the American market where they were selling off assets literally to keep fracking companies looking solvent or looking alive, so that it didn't terrify mum and dad investors who had put all their money into it, thinking that it could be converted to LPG and shipped off overseas for huge profits. And of course, that was only possible if the market demand increased or the price increased in Europe, which was only possible if Ukraine went to war and Russia couldn't get their gas into the market. So, you know, I'm struggling to see how fracking is a good idea anyway, other than, you know, killing everyone in proximate, you know, living quarters and not really making any money. But that is one of the bad policies in New Zealand First. So I'm not a New Zealand First, like, you know, they're not my idol, but monetarily, justice policy, all that sort of stuff. Look, we've found the giraffe. Okay, so on that level, they are the best. The Greens, however, not very practical, I think, on monetary policy and economics. They, you know, plan to transition all farms to organics by 2025, and I did a three-year development on this very subject, financed with a committed term sheet by the ANZ Bank of 120 million and Rank Group vendor finance of 50 million when they had all those farms in the middle of North Island for sale. And the international money didn't come through, so I went off overseas and probably had a far better life, I'm not sure. But the point is that transitioning agriculture is a very specific challenge and very important to New Zealand, which is why Gareth is like calling farmers like calling them out for living as paupers intentionally, living poor intentionally so they can sell their farm for millions, means he fundamentally misunderstands the entire basis of our production industry, agriculture industry. But because they're generational farmers, they love farming, that's what they do, they love their land, they hand it on to their children, they keep going, and they live poor just to do that. That's their objective. So no, Gareth, you're wrong. But back to New Zealand First, they suggest financing the farmers into more debt that most farmers can't afford in order to afford the transition. Well, obviously farmers need to be financed, but they need to be financed within debt structures that, you know, retain the interest payable, withhold interest payable, so that they're paying half the interest half of the interest of affording the transition on the money to afford the transition up front, and half of it later once they've started to recover that money. You know, there needs to be some finesse in how that's structured. And, you know, further to that, the Greens talk about putting the cost of fart tax or carbon tax, or, you know, carbon dioxide tax, which is what you and I breathe in, out to stay alive, and the ocean breathes it in, then it grows all of the plankton, which supplies most of the oxygen, all the trees breathe it in to grow all of our food and supply all life. So yes, that tax has been somehow misbranded to be the greatest pollutant and threat to our economy and life and survival. Go figure, and all the hairy armpits are buying it. But that aside, the Greens are suggesting that they constructively, very constructively, pass that tax on to the cost of the producer. Yeah, well, the farmers own the producers in New Zealand, if you haven't forgotten, so that just means smaller payouts. So wait, you want to increase their debt and you want to reduce their payout. Right. Well, that sounds like you're ready to sell them off to China, so that we're just, you know, fully foreign-owned on our farms, no small farmers anymore, and we are a food satellite of China in the future. Great. That's a great plan, Greens. I think you need to finesse that plan a little bit. But if you did, and you could join with New Zealand First, persuading them to redeem themselves from being dirty industrialists and focus on the fact that, you know, health is the most important value to us human beings, and if we have good health by not being, you know, toxically contaminated by dirty industry owners who make lots of profits, who continue completely unrestricted with the fake Paris Agreement, because that does absolutely nothing to stop any industrial destruction. I mean, absolutely nothing at all. That's the joke about it. It doesn't even include carbon monoxide listed as one of the gases that gets taxed, which is fantastic, because carbon monoxide is the, you know, putrid contamination spewing out the end of your exhaust of your car. One would think that would be top of the list for taxing, but no, that's not involved. Feel free to keep contaminating with your cars. Paris Agreement's not going to even try and stop that with unenforceable promises, like the rest of their unenforceable promises, while international law exists at the International Criminal Court, capable of transitioning 100